There was nothing fateful about meeting someone. For it is said that there's no such thing as fate or destiny. However, the moment a past coincidence is accepted as an inevitability, it will be interpreted as fate. If that's what happened between the raven-haired man with deep gray eyes and the lady with long blonde hair and eyes as blue as the sky, then it wasn't even a coincidence. Their marriage, once a fairy tale romance, is now in shambles. Entering the study, in an afternoon she won't forget, she handed her husband a white envelope containing her profile. He completely ignored it and excused himself for being busy, dismissing her by saying they'll talk later. Not wanting to relent, she told him she'd been investigating him. Tension filled the air as he stared at her. She brazenly asked him why he changed so much. All he did was utter her name. She told him that she already knew their meeting wasn't a coincidence, that he approached her intentionally. He didn't deny it and just gave her an affirmative nod. Gravely hurt by this affirmation, she bitterly laughed in response as she uttered that it must have been hard for him to play lovers with the daughter of the man he deeply loathes. Her father was a marquis and the nephew of the king. The raven-haired man was the Legion commander. He was her father's subordinate. They dated for 2 years, and soon they wed. Everything was perfect, or so she thought. When the monarch was overthrown by the Revolutionary Army, the nobility collapsed, and her father was killed. Her mother committed suicide. Her husband, once a highly skilled spy of their kingdom, was the commander-in-chief of said revolt. She trusted him despite the obvious change in his attitude and character, never minding the blood curdling screams of the public to have her punished and executed. All she needed was his love. Politics be damned. But reality caught up to her and slapped her awake. That's why she's now confronting her husband. And all he did was acquiesce to her inquiries and accusations. When she demanded for the truth, he admitted he hated her father and the royal family. Approaching her was also a part of his plan. When she asked him if he hates her, he did not just admit it. He emphasized how he hates her father and how he detests her. Considering the circumstances, she asked him for divorce, but he refused to do so. Bathed in crimson sunset, he sentenced her to a life of unhappiness. At that moment, she realized that his revenge has just begun. This man reeking with so much hatred is a stark contrast to the man she once knew. Years ago, they would simply spend time in idle chatter, whispering sweet nothings to each other. His promise of making her happy forever under the moonlit sky, when he proposed during their nighttime boat ride, seemed like a part of her imagination. She wished all of these were just a bad dream. But, no. Haunted by nightmares, she spent a sleepless night. She faced the morning with news on the Daily Post still taking about people's hatred against the fallen monarchy and its remaining nobility. As she was going out to get some fresh air, she encountered her husband's loyal subordinate, a blonde man with stern eyes. He scathingly informed her about the proposal to wed her husband to another woman, and it is going smoothly. She told the man she already asked her husband for a divorce and she would gladly appreciate it if he can convince her husband to sign the papers. That night, he visited her bedchambers and informed her that said proposal was already refused quietly. Unfortunately, rumors leaked out. She presented her proposal for a divorce once more, yet again he refused. Instead, he reminded her of the banquet they needed to attend as a couple. When she told him she doesn't want to, he threatened her that he'll send her to a mental hospital if she continues to defy him unreasonably. All her hopes of him returning to her side as the loving husband she once knew, disappeared. He left her anguished and full of anxiety. Having trouble sleeping, she tried to take some sleeping pills, but refrained. She put them in a container, instead. One morning, she summoned for the physician asking for a change of pills and complaining about her headache. When the doctor brushed it aside, the maids hearing the exchange between them did not hide their snide remarks. The day of the banquet arrived. As demanded of her husband, she came with him. People flocked around him, while everyone blatantly ignored her. Not wanting to cause a scene and to somehow avoid the agonizing hateful gaze of the other guests, she cupid herself by drinking cocktails on the liquor table. Whilst she's busy with the cocktails, one guest boldly asked her husband about his marriage talks with the lady he previously declined. He replied bluntly that he'll obviously reject the proposal, for he already has a wife. Unfortunately, the blonde lady did not hear him give such a reply. She was consuming glass after glass of the intoxicating drink. Wallowingly, she was about to take her 5th glass of liquor when her husband held her shoulder and took it from her. Puzzled, she looked up at him. Blue met gray, time seemed to stop. They were both a bit startled when someone announced that a master pianist would serenade the guests. Said pianist is a known genius and was the blonde lady's idol. Hearing the pianist play made her smile the way she used to. She failed to notice the sidelong glance her husband was giving her. After the performance, a guest maliciously urged her to play for them. Not getting any signs of protest from her husband in her behalf made her yield. It ended up with a horrible performance. Later that night, alone in his study, the raven-haired man pondered over his wife's obvious display of trauma over a mere piano performance. She was a prodigy of said instrument and enjoyed every second she's playing. Why would she be terrified of the mere sight of it? In her room, the blonde lady was staring at the piano. She tried to play but to no avail. The trauma from her younger years, when her father was killed by the revolutionaries right in front of her piano, was so vivid that the mere sight of it made her tremble. Her only solace, playing the piano, is now the root of her terror. It is then realized there's really nothing left for her. One day, while she was doing some needlework, her husband once again visited her bedchambers. This time, to confront her about her refusal to eat. He inspected her dresser and found out piled-up medicines, including her sleeping pills and other medications meant to alleviate chronic pains. One thing led to another, and his intent to coax her to eat became an argument that led him to say insensitive things. Threatening to force-feed her made her eat. Her smile, which used to be bright, is now constantly replaced by a blank facade. Her embroidery, an incoherent mess of sorts. These changes did not miss her husband's silent scrutiny. Wanting an escape, she asked to be allowed some time alone outside. But, her husband, the raven-haired man, saw through her scheme and realized immediately that it's her way of escaping her meals. Their encounter ended up with a threat coming from him. One more meal refusal would mean a confinement in the hospital. Inside his own room, her husband, the raven-haired man, took off his shirt and stared at the mirror. On his chest were a set of written scars, which meant a young man who had sex with men for money. Seeing the jarring mark on his skin makes even the most beautiful memories with his wife a horrid part of his past. One sunny day, the blonde lady went out to their courtyard to ease the tiredness that she's feeling. Alone, she pondered about the things she did to return their relationship the way they used to. She remembered the night she willingly surrendered herself to her husband, hoping that by having a child it would save their marriage. He did not reject her and they shared a moment of intimacy in his room. But he never showed her his body. Afterwards, without even sharing a meal with her, he left her in his cold room after the deed was done. She wondered why he did not reject her. As she agonized about her husband's actions, she felt the warmth of the sun and wished she could die that way. A greeting from someone broke her reverie. A lady with short lustrous red hair. The lady whom the people around her husband are rooting to be his wife. She boldly told her about their faction's plan to marry her to the blonde lady's husband. The blonde lady brushed her off by saying that talks of marriage are best discussed with her husband. She already asked him to divorce her. The red-haired lady need not worry. That same day, as she was spending her time inside their residence, her childhood friend, a man with golden hair and eyes of the same hue, visited her. He was an aristocrat. His family was a supporter of the fallen monarchy. He was able to escape arrest because he was working abroad when the monarchy fell. Recently he got divorced and was appointed ambassador of a foreign country, where remnants of the fallen monarchy went for refuge. Still harboring feelings for her, just like in the past, he visited to ask her to come with him. But she's seen right through his intentions. She's a member of the royal family. The moment she takes his hand, it will help his family and other aristocrats. Torn between her lingering feelings for her husband and the urge to run away, she hesitated and asked for time to think about the golden-eyed man's offer. After all, it's her last chance to get away from her husband. That night, as she was sharing a meal with her husband, he asked what she and the golden-eyed man talked about. To which she told him there's nothing to tell since the servants heard the whole conversation. Her husband insisted that it is also important to hear her side. She told him that her childhood friend, the golden-eyed man, wanted her to get divorced and come with him. Her husband then asked if the reason for her request to divorce their marriage is because she wanted to marry the golden-eyed man. She found his question ridiculous. What started as a simple inquiry about a visitation turned sour. And yet again her husband made it clear that he is not letting her go. His accusation was baseless. She already abhorred the idea that her childhood friend and his peers are merely eyeing her as a tool just because she has royal blood in her veins. Just the mere thought of being used creeps her out. However, her husband's unwillingness to divorce her puzzles her, to the point that she felt suffocated inside their residence. Morning came. The blonde-haired lady decided to go far away and visit a place she loved, using the excuse of going to church to pray, and going all thorny when the servants tried to stop her. She left alone without an attendant and boarded the train. She visited the sea. As the sun was setting, she was captivated by the scenery. It made her want to have a souvenir. Luckily, a local painter offered to paint her for free. The painting itself turned marvelous. Feeling shy as she saw her face, which she thought is way prettier than she actually was, she decided to buy one of the painter's previous works. A breathtaking painting of the sea genuinely caught her attention. As she smiled at the sheer beauty of the painting, she radiated an aura akin to that of an innocent child. Little did she know her husband was nearby, and saw the spectacle she made as she beamed at the painting she purchased. Unbeknownst to her, he's been following her from the train station. Right after she left, a servant reported about her display of hostility. Her husband immediately boarded his motored vehicle and rushed to the station, just in time for the train to board its passengers. What urged him to follow was her demeanor. Though she purchased a train ticket, she doesn't seem to be planning to run away. He suspected she'll be meeting her childhood friend, but that too was just his vague speculations. Her husband saw how she enjoyed the sea, and wondered when was the last time she smiled that way. Memories flooded him. Her pristine and noble smile was a treat she would solely address to him. Those days were his happiest. Not wanting to welcome useless thoughts of blissful moments, her husband was tempted to approach and grab her and take her back to their residence. But seeing how happy she was made him unable to move. Dusk was fast approaching. She decided to soak her feet and collect some seashells. Feeling out of sorts, she walked absent-mindedly towards the deeper part of the sea. Seeing her unusual behavior, her husband ran to stop her. It startled her to find him there. She expected he'll send a servant or a low-ranking officer to apprehend and bring her back. Not the very man himself. He safely brought her to the shore and told her to pick up her things which she left unattended. As she did so, she accidentally wounded her left foot. Despite her protests, he carried her to a nearby lodging and booked a room so that she can wash her wound, which he bandaged as soon as she finished cleaning it. Her husband, the raven-haired man, plagued by the idea that she was planning to see her childhood friend, asked why is she so hellbent in going to the sea, to the point that she ostracized her servants by lying. She told him all she wanted was to visit the sea. Her husband voiced out his concern about the way she left her things unattended on the shore, to which she replied that she forgot about the possibility that someone could steal her things. He gave her a stern scolding and ended up saying that he hates how she remained her naivety about her, despite the change that is happening around her. Taking it at face value, she acquiesced to his scolding and berated herself. She even called herself foolish for hurting her foot by merely retrieving her belongings, criticized the way she blindly confessed her love for the man who hated her, and how she thoughtlessly hoped their relationship would return to the way it was. She honestly admitted that in the span of their marriage, she loved him for more than 3 years. It didn't matter to her that he spearheaded the downfall of their kingdom and the death of her parents. Her husband asked her if she loved him still. She honestly told him that her feelings don't matter anymore, nothing would change, her heart is already useless anyway. They ended up staying for the night, and shared a room. As she lay down to sleep, her husband continues to skim through the documents a subordinate brought for his perusal. She wondered why he still chased after her when he openly admits his hatred of her and her family. She can't understand his intentions. As her husband was about to approach the bed, it was then she decided to take some sleeping pills. He inquired about her plight and was outright chided for relying to medications to sleep. Her husband prepared some warm chamomile tea as an alternative to stimulate sleep. While she enjoys the warm drink, her husband took the liberty of inspecting her bag and saw the address card her childhood friend, the golden-haired man, left for her. His words were quiet but accusatory as he asked her about the incriminating item, to which she assured him that she wasn't planning to meet with him. Feeling that another argument might arise, the blonde-haired lady bid her husband good night and went to sleep. Watching her made her husband uneasy, he left the bed and continued inspecting her things. He threw away in the trash can the seashells he found in the pocket of her long coat. As he wondered why she collected such impractical things, he remembered how she described herself, moments ago, as something useless. Feeling uncomfortable, her husband went out the balcony and smoked. It gave him momentary comfort, allowing him to muse over things. It exasperated him that no matter how much he drags his wife down and trample on her, she can still touch the deepest, most vulnerable part of him with her mere presence. A few days later, the blonde lady decided to go out. This time with a servant. Riding the motored vehicle, she asked her companion where can they find a deserted jewelry shop. The companion, who also drives for her, mentioned a place in a secluded alleyway. Unfortunately, vehicles can't fit in there, they'll need to walk. She thought it was fine and agreed with it. Reaching their destination by foot, she went in and sold her expensive trinkets. They were gifts from her husband, the raven-haired man. When he was still playing the role of a loving suitor, he would often gift her with shiny and expensive trinkets, because he knows how she favors such frivolities. After appraisal, the jeweler announced that the trinkets amounted to £2,300, an amount that someone can live off for a very long time. The jeweler asked her if she finds the amount favorable. She told him to proceed as is. As she did so, she noticed her wedding ring and had it appraised. The ring alone amounts to £7,000. In her lifetime, even the era of her family's regime, she never owned a jewelry as expensive as her wedding ring, which was a gift from her husband. Unfortunately, the jeweler can't purchase her ring. Their shop can't produce that vast amount. She was told to approach bigger shops if ever she really wanted to dispose of her ring. Finished with her dealings, she went out and met with her companion. As they were walking back to their vehicle, she noticed a young man with red eyes. His gaze made her uncomfortable. And for good reason. Because all of a sudden, he pulled out a pistol and shot her in the abdomen. Searing, burning pain beyond compare shot right through her. She remembered that her husband, in the past, was shot 3 times. How painful it must have been. As her consciousness fades away, she recalled the hateful gaze of her shooter. Musing why he didn't shoot her in the head instead of her abdomen, she lost consciousness. Her husband, the raven-haired man, was busy as usual when the call arrived. Ignoring the pile of work in front of him, he rushed to the hospital. She was still unconscious when he arrived. The attending physician briefed her husband about her condition. According to him, the gunshot wound wasn't that deep, so she's out of danger. However, because of said incident, she had a miscarriage. It also affected her ability to conceive again. Her husband wasn't expecting the baby. To think their periodic intimacy of 4 years would come to fruition. Believing her to be barren, news of her pregnancy surprised him. The doctor informed him that they will remove the remnants of her pregnancy as soon as she wakes up. In response, the raven-haired man ordered that news of his wife's condition must remain a secret. Remembering the blonde lady's previous chronic episodes, her husband inquired if pregnancy can trigger sleeplessness. The doctor gave an affirmative answer and added that women can also experience digestive problems and headaches when pregnant. All of which were symptoms the blonde lady showed previously. Her husband requested the doctor to inspect the previous medications she'd been taking and find if there's a better alternative. The blonde lady awoke from a dream where she and her husband were sharing an intimate time. When she woke up, she saw her husband having an unusually pained and troubled expression. The doctor was summoned and explained her situation. He left immediately afterwards. She asked her husband how old the child was. It was 11 weeks old. Counting, she realized it was from that night, of which she dreamt about, that the baby was conceived. As she was mulling over things, her husband shocked her with a proposition. He offered her to adopt a child. She ridiculously stared at him and asked what was he talking about. Her husband told her that he is aware of her ardent desire to have a child. If she still wishes to have one, since the doctor said she'll be having a hard time conceiving a child, he's allowing her to adopt one. Her frustration skyrocketed at his indifference with her plight, not to mention he considered her miscarriage a blessing in disguise considering their current situation. Knowing that he is not interested with the idea of having a child, she outright declined his offer. She told him she doesn't need it anymore, that it's not politically advantageous. When her husband insisted on his proposition, she brushed him off by saying she wanted to rest and that she needed some time for herself. Alone in her reverie, she grudgingly agreed in silence with her husband that it is a blessing of some sort that they lose the child. It would only suffer in a household that lacks love. But still she felt a gaping void as she accepted this truth. Days later, after their consultation with her attending physician and she was given new prescription drugs, her husband informed her of his intent to change her usual doctor. Not wanting to argue, she agreed to his plans. He'd do whatever he wants anyway. On the day of her discharge, reporters flocked outside, hungry for a gossip they can print. Prompted by her husband to ignore the press, she remained silent amidst the questions being thrown everywhere. But one voice among the rest caught her attention. She stopped to look who it was. A brown-haired woman was shouting and forcefully introducing herself. It was the sister of the young man who shot her. Hearing this, the reporters turned their attention to the brown-haired woman. Everyone's asking her for an interview, but the brown-haired woman declined. She insisted that she'll only talk to the madam, the blonde-haired lady who was the wife of the commander-in-chief, the raven-haired man. The blonde lady's husband immediately gave orders to remove the brown-haired lady. As her husband's subordinates extricate the woman from the vicinity, she shouted at the blonde lady that she'll wait for her to get in touch. During this exchange, her husband, the raven-haired man, urged the blonde lady to board their motorized vehicle. It was raining outside, the pitter-patter of the rain on the roof of their motorized vehicle and the coziness of its interior made room for musings. The blonde lady wondered if she's seen the brown-haired woman somewhere. Was she holding a grudge against her? The crease on her brows did not escape her husband, who was just sitting beside her. When he inquired what's worrying her, she voiced out her concern about the woman. Her husband brushed her worries aside by reminding her that she's both a victim and a patient. She need not concern herself about the woman. During their exchange, the blonde lady discovered that her husband had been intercepting the letters sent to her by the brown-haired woman. She opted not to get angry, but she asked her husband to investigate her, in exchange for the letters he stole from her. After a few days, she received reports about the brown-haired woman. She read it by the window of her room. As she did so, she saw her husband walking with the lady with lustrous red hair. They seemed to be having a good time talking to each other. Her husband suddenly looked up to her bedroom window. Their eyes met, blue meets gray, but he immediately looked away. Taking it as rejection, the blonde lady moved away from her window. She failed to see that her husband once again looked up with a look of longing in his eyes. The lady with red hair witnessed it though. In her room, after reading the correspondence that she received, she decided to get in touch with the brown-haired woman and confront whatever lingering issues she have with her. It'll be her first and last chance to confront her past, so she can move forward. Days before her meeting with the brown-haired woman, her husband introduced her new doctor. She was a kind-looking female physician with soft green eyes. The blonde lady welcomed the change, but she got agitated when talks about psychological consultation was mentioned. She outright told her husband she'll not have any of it, but her husband told her that it is necessary. Little did her husband know. The blonde lady is perfectly aware of her own psychological problem. When she's under too much stress, she begins to question her reality, whether she's in a dream or not. She refuses any talks of consultation because she's scared that the truth will be revealed. Days went by and her meeting with the brown-haired woman came. Her husband, the raven-haired man, insisted she brought guards with her, but she stonewalled and told him she'll have a private chat with the woman instead. Seeing she won't relent, he handed her his personal knife, just as a precaution. She met with the brown-haired woman and discovered the shocking truth about her father. According to the woman, her brothers and the other commoners who joined the cause for the revolution were simple citizens, oppressed by the privileged and their whims. Said members of the revolutionary forces acted as spies. Unfortunately, spies who are caught are tortured horribly and then are immediately executed to avoid the eyes of the media. Said torture during inquisitions was headed by her father, the Marquis. One of the gravely tortured spies that the Marquis interrogated himself was the older brother of the brown-haired woman. The night her brother was tortured was the night the blonde lady held her piano concerto. Right after the Marquis tortured the older brother of the brown-haired woman, he immediately left the vicinity, after he left instructions to execute the man. The blonde lady vividly remembered that event. As soon as her family took their photo, right after her piano recital, she noticed the commotion just outside the venue gates. Curious, she asked her father. But all he told her was an individual was appealing about a trial they violated. Taking her father's word at face value, she believed him and naively continued enjoying the lavish party they prepared. That night, as she was enjoying the night air in the balcony of her room, she saw a young lady her age, with bloodshot eyes from crying, being apprehended by the guards. It was a sight she's not used to. She stood there frozen. It was as if she was forced to see the depths of human depravity. Brushing it off as a coincidence then, she now remembered where she saw the brown-haired woman. It was her that night. The young lady who was causing a scene at their gates. As the brown-haired woman continued with her story, she made it clear that she wasn't there to appeal for what her younger brother did to the blonde lady. He deserves to be punished. She just wanted the blonde lady to know their story, and how her older brother died. Is ignorance a bliss or a sin? The brown-haired woman doesn't know. She doesn't even know if it's justifiable to blame the blonde woman. Wishing for her full recovery, the brown-haired woman bid her farewell. The blonde lady uttered a sincere apology before her guest can leave. Followed by another, and then another. Meeting the brown-haired woman made her realize one thing: all the horrible things that transpired, which she failed to understand at that time, were irreversible. That night she visited her husband's study and handed a petition for leniency for her assailant, the younger brother of the brown-haired woman. Surprised with her action, he confronted her. Why would she write a leniency petition for her attacker? Sarcastically, he inquired if she plans to be a saint. Unwilling to ride with his provocations, the blonde lady calmly pointed out that they both know she can't be a saint. To her husband's surprise, she smiled at him the way she used to smile when they were still sweet to each other. As he wondered about her actions, the blonde lady apologized to her husband. She apologized for everything that transpired, even for the ones she had no knowledge of. But her husband brushed her off and told her she shouldn't be apologizing to him. She acquiesced by saying she'll bear that in mind.